I call Scott Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise as a member of the Health Select Committee to speak on this bill, the Radiation Safety Bill, in its first reading. So the Health Select Committee is so ably led and chaired by my colleague and friend, the member for Tamaki, Simon O'Connor. And I'm pleased to report to the House that the committee is a collegial committee, it's a constructive committee, it's a committee that does very good work. And tonight I think we've heard some very good presentations, some very good debates which give people listening a measure of the solid approach and serious approach taken by members of the House Select Committee across the House. And in fact I'm delighted also to note that unless I've missed anything, it sounds to me as if all parties are supporting the introduction of this radiation safety bill, and are doing so with a degree of unanimity that is sometimes seldom to occur in this House. So that's quite encouraging. And Mr. Speaker, I don't have any particular specialty or knowledge about radiation or radiation matters, but like most New Zealanders, Mr. Speaker, I guess I've got an innate sense that somehow radiation is bad, it's evil, that it does bad things to you, and that it's not something that humans should get too much of. But when I was doing a little bit of research ahead of this first reading speech tonight, sir, I was of course reminded very quickly that there are an awful lot of radiated items, machinery, equipment, medical bits and pieces and what have you that actually do help encourage the health and well-being of humans, and that radiation in appropriate use in small doses with the right kind of science, the right kind of background, the right kind of medical approach is in fact very useful. And sir, so it came as a surprise to me, as no doubt it will come a surprise to people listening, that there are actually already some 4,300 licensed users of radiation sources in New Zealand. I remember back to my university days, sir, when I had an opportunity at the University of Auckland to go into the engineering department, and there in the bowels of the engineering department back in the mid-80s were doors that were locked solidly, quite ominous looking doors with these big radiation symbols across them. And I can remember being quite surprised to see those. But that sort of work, that scientific, educational research work that was being done at the University of Auckland back in those days, and probably still is being done there today, is the sort of work that this bill seeks to license and to control and to regulate in a way that is modern and that is functional and that is going to bring us more into an age where the sort of controls around this radiation equipment, whether it be for science, for health or for industry, is going to be more appropriate than the old legislation that dates back now 50 years and is time for a bit of a change. So one of the things that I've discovered, of course, is that there's an awful lot of radiation equipment used for diagnostic health processes. It's used in all kinds of medical treatment, and it's something that science has shown us can be extremely useful in fighting some of the dreadful medical malaise that we confront as mere humans on this mortal coil. And so, given that there are already so many licensed users of radiation emitting systems, devices and treatments, it makes absolute sense, Mr. Speaker, to now update the legislation, to modernise it and to bring us into line with international best practice around the world. And so I'm pleased to see that the Labour Party, the Greens and New Zealand First will be supporting this bill through to Select Committee, where I know under the chairmanship of Simon O'Connor the committee will shepherd the bill through, and we will be paying very close and careful attention to the various aspects contained in it. Sir, a major source of exposure to radiation in New Zealand is, of course, X-rays, and medical X-rays perform a crucial and important part in our medical system. But as Barbara Stewart mentioned in her speech to the House tonight, of course, dentists are big users of X-rays, so are podiatrists, and of course, in the veterinarian area, they are also using X-rays and radiation equipment. So all these sectors that are doing good work in medical science and in research and in the animal husbandry area. These are all sectors of our economy, sectors of our society where more radiation is being used constructively than most New Zealanders, I think, probably would at first give thought to. And then there are the areas that have been referred to by my colleague Jackie Dean, the non-ionising radiation devices such as lasers and ultrasound. And we'll be going through the Select Committee process to actually have a very careful analysis of the pros and cons of non-ionising radiation, but we'll also be, I think, wanting to have a look at what role industry plays in the use of radiation. And I was interested to read, Mr. Speaker, that radiation materials and equipment is used for things as diverse as measuring the contents of hoppers that contain all kinds of agricultural products, and then of course X-rays of an industrial nature are used to test for welding, joints and a whole range of other mechanical components for cracks, faults and all those sorts of things. So once we start delving into this area, what on the face of it may seem to be a slightly dull but worthy bill, one that is simply designed on the face of it to bring New Zealand standards and best practice up to a modern and new appropriate level that is more modern than the 1965 original legislation, we find that very quickly there are many aspects to our day-to-day life where radiation and radiation equipment is used for all sorts of good, but it can equally be used for harm. So, sir, I just want to spend a minute. I took an opportunity to have a look at the regulatory impact statement. And I want to spend a second or two just going through what's wrong with the current old legislation. So why is the change necessary and why do we need to modernise it? Well, the legislation that we operate under at the moment doesn't enable the regulation of non-ionising radiation and practices involving exposure to naturally occurring sources of radiation. So there's a need for us as a House and as a Select Committee to focus on that area, and I know that we will. Secondly, the legislation that exists at the moment places a responsibility for the safety of radiation sources on individual users. Now, sir, that may have been appropriate in the 1960s. It may have even been appropriate for several years after that. But in today's modern world and modern economy, it's no longer appropriate, and it seems far more sensible, in fact, to make the business, the manager, or the operating organisation that is responsible. And so, sir, Barbara Stewart raised questions about who will be eligible to be a licence holder, who will have a licence to possess, is the way that the bill refers to it, and those are subjects that the Select Committee will, I'm sure, focus on in some detail. The current legislation, which we are going to replace by the introduction of this bill, does not, for instance, enable the Ministry of Health to prohibit the use of a radiation source if it is unsafe or has been obtained illegally. Now, sir, in today's modern world, that seems to be an anachronism. It seems to be something that definitely needs attention and addressing by this House. And again, I know that that is a matter that the Select Committee will want to spend time addressing. And finally, just in terms of why we need to introduce this new legislation, the current legislative environment makes no provision for the preparation of safety, security and emergency plans by licensees. Now, in 1965, the creation of emergency plans and things of that nature were probably relatively unheard of, not something that people paid a lot of attention to. But in today's modern world, of course, we want to plan and have plans in place for every eventuality, particularly if there was to be any kind of problem. And so, sir, that brings us to what is really the public policy objective of this new piece of legislation. And I want, in closing, sir, just to quote from the regulatory impact statement, and it says that the public policy objectives are to protect the health and safety of individuals and the environment from the harmful harmful effects of radiation, to ensure the safe and secure management of radiation sources and their uses, and to bring New Zealand into line with international best practice and international obligations with respect to the safety and security of radiation sources and their use. And Sir, that seems to me to neatly sum up the objectives of the bill. It's a good bill. I'm looking forward to participating in the Select Committee process, and I commend and endorse it to the House.
I call the whistle.